In this video, we're going to learn how to round whole numbers to the nearest 10, 100 or 1000. First of all, let's consider the number 254. And recall from last time that the number is made up of units, tens, and hundreds. If I want to round to the nearest 10, what I'm going to do is underline the number which is in the tens column, which is 5. I'm then going to draw a dotted line between the 5 and the 4. I'm then going to look at the number in the units column, because that's just to the right of the tens, and this will determine whether I round up or if I round down. So I have a 4. That tells me to round down, because the rule is five or more, round up. So if we have a 4, that tells us to round down, which means that I leave the 5 and the 2 as they are, and everything after that dotted line becomes 0. So I end up with an answer of 250. Let's consider another example. Let's say I've got the number 29 and I want to round this to the nearest 10. You can probably see already that the multiple of 10 which is closest to this number is 30, so we're going to get 30. But what we can do is the same as before. We can underline the number in the twos column, not the twos column, excuse me, the number in the tens column. We then draw a dotted line, and the number in the units column tells us whether to round up or to round down. Remember the rule. If we have 5 or more in the units, we're going to round the 10 up. So the 9 will tell the 2 to round up to 3. And everything after the dotted line is still 0, so our answer would be 30. That's 29 to the nearest 10. Let's consider 279. If I wanted to round that to the nearest 10, I underline the number in the tens column, draw a dotted line. I have a 9 in the units, which is above 4, it's 5 or more, which tells me to round up. So the 7 will become an 8, leaving me with 280. So now let's consider rounding to the nearest 100. So let's imagine I have the number 372. If I want to round to the nearest 100, I underline the number in the hundreds column, I draw a dotted line, and I look at the number in the tens. It's the nearest, it is the digit which is just to the right of the number that I'm rounding. I'm rounding 3 to the nearest, I'm rounding 372 to the nearest 100. We underline the number in the hundreds column, draw the dotted line. 7 is greater than 4, so it tells the 3 to round up, so it becomes 4. And everything after that dotted line becomes 0, leaving me with an answer of 400. Let's try a trickier one. Let's imagine I have 987, and I want to round that to the nearest 100. Well, I underline the 9 because that's the number in the hundreds column, because it's 987. Draw a dotted line. The 8 in the tens column will tell the 9 to round up. Now, you might think, well, what's that going to become? Well, if I have 9 hundreds and I add on another 100, we have 10 hundreds, which is really just 1,000. So that means we have the 9 essentially becoming 10, and everything after the dotted line becoming 0. So we can see that the 900s have really rounded up to 10 hundreds, which is 1,000. So our answer would be 1,000. That would be 987 to the nearest 100. Finally, let's consider rounding to the nearest 1,000. So let's say I have 2,472. If I want to round this to the nearest 1,000, I'm going to underline the number in the thousands column, which is 2. I draw a dotted line, and I look at the number to the right of the dotted line, which is in the hundreds, and that's 4. Now, 4 is less than 5, so that tells me to round down. So I end up with 2,000. Remember, rounding down just means that we leave the underlined digit as it is, and everything after that underlined digit becomes 0. Rounding up just means you increase the underlined digit by 1. So if I try another one, let's say I wanted to round 3. Let's do 3,682 to the nearest thousand. We would underline the number in the thousands, draw a dotted line. The 6 is bigger than 4, so that tells us to round up. So the 3 will become 4, and everything after the dotted line will become 0, so we end up with 4,000. Finally, let's consider 9,746. If I want to round that to the nearest thousand, I underline the number in the thousands column, and we should know that's 9. Units, tens, hundreds, thousands. We then draw a dotted line after the 9. The 7 will tell the 9 to round up, so we change the 9 into a 10, and everything after the dotted line will become 0, so we end up with 1,000 again. 1,000 again. Here are some questions for you to try. Pause the video now, have a go, and when you're ready for the answers, press play. Here are the answers.